think about it in two ways. Do you want an equity partner or do you want a debt partner? And there are so many creative ways to craft a deal and how to get something out of the dirt, but you got to start there. And you got to understand the rules of engagement with those two different paths are going to lead you in two different places.
Welcome to Builders, Budgets, and Beers. I'm Reece Barnes, and I started this podcast to have real conversations about money in the building industry, the wins, the mistakes, and everything in between. I believe builders deserve to feel confident about their finances, and that starts by hearing from others who've been through it too. This industry can be slow to change, but the right stories and the right tools can make profitability feel possible. Let's get into it. Alrighty, Brad. Mics are hot. We're rolling.
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you, as always. Really appreciate you hopping back on the show for the second time, which, to share with the listeners, we have Brad Robinson on, who had one of the most successful, most downloaded episodes in Builders, Budgets, and Beers. Not lying to you.
Really?
100%. In Builders, Budgets, and Beers history. And it was with Scott Bland. It was one of our earliest episodes, and it was fixed price versus cost plus.
It was totally Scott. Totally Scott.
It totally was. It totally was.
You know, funny story. I heard Scott speak in DC this year at the CBUSA Summit, and you know his take there was really solid as well. I mean, he's very with it. Love that guy.
Very with it. Scott has a very interesting background as well, but but just construction and the family business was pulling him back to, I think, Waco. I think he's out of Waco.
But being in DC, pulling back into his roots in the government, He had some stories to tell at the hotel bar.
Oh, I can only imagine. I got to catch up with Scott. It's been a while. But I digress. Thank you again so much for jumping on. Go ahead and give the listeners, for those that haven't listened to your episode or aren't familiar with you, give them a little background on yourself.
Yeah. So we're down here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're a custom home builder. We operate more like a customer representative, though. Oftentimes our clients are coming to us and have a pretty big vision in mind, you know, for what it is that they'd like to execute, and maybe don't have a lot of time. So we've just been great at being conduit and connectors back to some wonderful architects and some great interior designers, and have just a suite of amazing engineers on tap to help build these amazing projects. And this past year, we're officially 1 year and 13 days into being in the Charleston market.
Dude, congrats. You've crossed the threshold.
Yeah. And it's not without its hurdles and road, bumps. But we're having a good time. We've got a great build that's in flight there. A couple of transitions happening. We have a bald eagle on the adjacent lot, so we're still waiting on that bald eagle to fly the nest,
like the bird.
Yeah, it's there's a 330-foot federally protected fly zone around the nest, and so we're in the middle of waiting on that bald eagle to fly the nest again, so that we can make noise and build a house.
Dude, that's insane. We got to take a break. That is the shit that just blows my mind. I was talking to Mark Williams about a project that he had with like a really high-end client, something to do with like light pollution. But these are the hurdles that you just don't anticipate or think about. And you're just like, how do you circumnavigate this? You wait or you figure it out. I don't know. You get creative.
Yeah. I mean, we admittedly went and got a federal permit to be able to work during this nesting period, but there's a biologist on staff for the architectural review board and for the community itself, and so the community biologist gives guidelines on, hey, look, you may have this permit, but you still need to hold tight because the bird is active. It may be having babies. Like there's all kinds of stuff that has to happen, and transparently the rules exist because I think as I understand it, and it could be hearsay or folklore, but some jet was buzzing down the beach and a bird fell out. And unfortunately, now all of a sudden there's a protection in place to prevent these kind of incidents from happening again, and protect, these bald eagles who nest in the areas that we build on the barrier islands in Charleston. So, I mean, we're on the water where it's marshland, connected to, basically the beachfront. So it's a different environment altogether. And so I just enjoy it because it's so uniquely different to building in Atlanta or building in the mountains and highlands cachers, which all present unique opportunities in their own right. But it's pretty fun to be able to build from mountain to, basically plateau in Atlanta to beach in Charleston. I love having all three of those all those arrows are in my quiver.
1000%. It's all exposure. And, I think these like little challenges, these little subtle road bumps, as you put it, it keeps you sharp. It keeps you on your toes. It's problem solving. Okay. So you mentioned that Bradford is obviously high-end luxury, custom home building. It's a client representative, correct? That's the term?
Yeah. We look at ourselves as owners' representatives. I mean, we want to come in and advocate on behalf of the owner to deliver the desired outcome, as opposed to being along for the journey of just building a home. Now, that being said, we have lots of wonderful relationships with architects and designers who will still bring a project our way, and they act as, as a member of the build team. And, but clients, I've found, do not want to be project managers. And whether you realize it or not, if you come in as part of a team, one of three in a lot of cases, you're oftentimes operating with a homeowner who is acting a lot like a project manager, navigating information or jockeying information back from each one of these people. And architects typically, sit in a position where they kind of lead the crew too. But what I found is that we find that more than not, our clients are asking us to step in and occupy that space. And we're happy to do so. And I think that we've delivered some wonderful projects with the outcomes that they wanted, and then we've just built a reputation based on that. So it's not to take anybody else's place, but I think there's a place for it.
100%. And I think especially as you do go, maybe call it upmarket, might be the wrong term, but just like in a higher end build, like that is certainly what that clientele is looking for. Someone that they can truly trust and like know that the product's going to be moving at a very quality rate.
Very much so. And I think the other piece of the puzzle is that a lot of our clients have an understanding that we also develop. So being in a position where we're investors and developers and builders, they know that we're uniquely capable of managing the entire process without them having to be involved.
Yep.
And in a lot of cases, our clients are busy professionals that do not want to be in the middle of it. They want someone to give them their freedom back and let them go do the thing that makes them money or the thing that really makes them happy. And then be able to trust that they're giving it off to someone who's going to speak on their behalf and be the loudest voice in the room when it comes time to put that team together. So, we're not doing the architecture in-house. We're not doing some cases we're doing light interiors, but it's more design selection coordination and collaborating with those interior designers. If a client does ask us to bite off an entire design project, oftentimes, we're capable. It's not to suggest that my designers that I have here aren't good enough to do it. They are plenty well good enough to do it. But a lot of times these projects are with named architects. They want a named interior designer.
Sure.
That adds a bit of prestige and value,
of course,
to the size of project that we're doing. And, when you're building a $9.8 million house or a $5.5 million house or, even an $8.9 million house, which is the case in, the other market, the name carries a lot of weight, just inevitably. Totally. It's not even necessarily the name, it's what they design and what they're uniquely good at designing, because they ensure that all of those elements that they're known for stay intact and don't get VE'd out of their projects.
1000%. And again, just going back to like the luxury side of this, like you're talking like a $5 million North product, like the clientele wants that. And I think the VE comment's important too. It's like, these aren't people that are like trying to nickel and dime a project. Like it's not, maybe not be like an open checkbook. Like there are parameters around that, but they want what they want. Right.
Yeah.
And
no, look, I feel like as I've approached more projects that are north of 10 million in this past year. I've got 4 that are really moving in some kind of way or another with the client in tow. Yeah, there's no concession. There's no concession at all. Matter of fact. So they want what they want, and that's okay, because that's what I'm here to do, is deliver on that and to find the best path forward. Sometimes it's less square footage if there is a constraint on what they're willing to invest, but make no mistake, a lot of these folks have the money to do it. They just know that it's not a fiscally responsible decision unless they're going to live in it themselves. So
totally. Well, and speaking of $10 million projects, tell the listeners about the one that you guys just got awarded.
Yeah, so unlike it's not awarded in our case, but we were presented an opportunity. There's a local magazine here. It's Atlanta Homes and Lifestyle. We have been working with them for a couple of years to identify a great site, pull in an amazing architect, and leverage all the best designers in our market to put together essentially not a parade home. Like let's not get confused. It is not a parade home at all. It is actually you've got every major brand that's in the luxury space that wants to be a part of this to showcase their best and newest products. And they approach the magazine to bring those products forward. We are just the sponsor builder who was selected, but we get an opportunity to conduct the show and to build this house. And so we are going to be doing the 2026 holiday show house, awesome. Which it's a beautifully designed home by Rodolfo Castro. I'm incredibly humbled to be working alongside with him. His work is typically reserved for those who commission him and occupy his time. So to be able to build one for him outside of the confines of having a client on board is a really special honor. The interior designers that the editor brings on board, and that they are just amazing. We have some absolutely amazing investors on board bringing this to life. So it will be for sale once it does go up. But they sell tickets to this event, and thousands of people quite literally will come and tour this house over the course of about a month or so's time until the end, in which it will hopefully go home with someone new. You can't say go home to a house that you're buying. You're coming home to the home that you didn't know that you really needed, that didn't exist today, that will then. That's what I love about it.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. I think that they probably do know. They just haven't identified it yet.
True.
But no, dude, I'm super stoked to follow that one along. For anyone who isn't following you, how do they follow you along and stay up to date on this project?
Yeah, I've got to be a little cautious on that particular project because I don't know what's going to be totally allowed to showcase, but we'll pepper in some stuff. You can always follow along our current signature builds on Bradford Built on Instagram. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so I'm always posting the cool stuff that I see, or maybe my thoughts around what it is that we're doing that's cool to me. And then, our website is a great place to go. We typically put our portfolio work up there. We try to capture as many as we can. At any given time, our firm is in, there could be 12 to 14 projects in flight. But we typically only showcase maybe 4 or maximum 5 projects at a time so that folks can follow along with the builds. Totally. Because we're typically talking, there's a narrative built around each one of these projects for a specific reason. Similar to our project Golden Leaf, which is, I'm super stoked because it'll be, it's our lab house number 1 is what we're calling it, as we lean into our wellness driven initiative and building for the biological as opposed to the builder's ego, and not to offend anyone, but that home will be the first home in Georgia to be well certified. So I'm really stoked for that. I'm aiming for platinum. We did blow a 1.3 before any insulation. So
I imagine that's good. I can't act like I know what that means. That's got to be good.
You know building. So
yeah, but not to that degree. I know it's a thing where they test it's the tightness of the home, right? Yeah,
it's just an air exchange per hour, and so this house is made of ICF, which is not. It's not a new technology at this point, right? I'm reluctant to say that anymore because in Florida and in some places, else, like even in, Phoenix, where you really are shooting for a higher energy efficient and an insulating property. Like these homes are great for that reason. But what most people don't think about is that they don't breathe. And that's a great thing in our case, right? So we want to minimize any air infiltration coming through the envelope or any other penetration for that point. And we want to mechanically bring in that air, filter that air, condition that air, and move it around in such a way that, our clients have extreme confidence that the indoor air quality index is going to be as crisp and clean as it could be without any allergens or pollutants.
I love it. I love it. Well, and even just to like jump into the topic today, I think like this is a fantastic preface, adding validity to the topic that we're going to be talking about today. And I mean, maybe I'm being too ambiguous here, but essentially like, Brad, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. Like I remember when I met you, was this 5 years ago? It had to have been 5, if not over 5 years ago at a Boulder Trend University. Yeah. We were drinking boots down in the old, I can't remember what it's called, that Crescent Moon. Anyways, you built a hell of a business. And for today's topic, I'm massively interested to dig into, I guess we could call it like your perspective on capital in the business, talking about like profitability, kind of your journey, and even what you're doing today. And for the listeners, again, like when we're talking to Brad and he's got, 10 to 12 projects going at any given time, and he's got, $10 million opportunities that he's working through. All of this stuff takes time, but again, it can happen on like a fairly accelerated path if you're as focused as Brad is. So I'm stoked to kind of dig into your mind on that. So I think just to like kind of like preface the conversation regarding capital, like how do you view raising capital, deploying capital, leveraging it in your business?
Yeah. And has that been an evolution, right? So, when I started this business, I was much like anyone else. I had a small seed or nest egg that I was operating to try to maintain and hold very tightly to. I wasn't deploying any of my own capital towards the projects per se, and I wasn't doing a lot of investing at the early onset. I was focused on attracting the right client. And I mean, look, hell, I could say that I was trying to attract any client at the onset to try to build my name or build a good reputation and showcase my craftsmanship and the quality of work and the type of experience that I really wanted to be able to deliver to our customers. And I got really good at that first. So let's just start there, right? I come from very humble beginnings. I didn't have there was no gift that I got starting this thing. I started it from absolutely zero. That's and from day one, I focused on the core values. Is just doing right by the clients and building it that way. Now, as time went on, and I was able to pull back a little bit and then begin to deploy capital personally for myself again, as I had in my past, right? But not while I was actually executing. I'm like everybody else. I was trying to build a spec here or there for myself, for my own portfolio. And now as things have evolved, I'm building more build to rents to keep for myself. So I don't really have a build and exit strategy from a personal portfolio perspective at this time. What I did is, the conversations are, quickly come up between some of the best agents that we're working with, other developers, people that share values and that want to do projects with you because of the things that you're doing or the uniqueness of the type of building you're doing. And I think in this case, I'm kind of more speaking to our wellness driven approach. If you look outwardly at communities, you only have one option. You've got pretty builder A or pretty builder B, and then you're picking based on personality. Who do I get along with for a year and a half or two, right?
Totally.
In this case, we have developers approaching us saying, hey, we want to approach more high net worth individuals and people that tend to optimize their life, are interested in health and wellness, and we would like for you to help us attract by being a builder on our development. And so now as things have kind of changed, and that's really, really recent, let me be transparent. This wellness-based approach is new to us. I mean, we've been working on it for a little bit better than 7 months, but I've only been deploying it now for in total 2 months.
Sure.
So
you're right on the front end. Yeah.
I mean, we've only begun publicly explaining this, and so but to talk about the capital component of it, you know, when I was first engaging with banks and communicating with hard money lenders and or private money and JV deals, there's a lot of ways to go about this. And so the easiest way, I think, if I were a new builder getting into this, is think about it in two ways. Do you want an equity partner or do you want a debt partner?
Mm-hmm.
I think people just need to delineate that right away. And there are so many creative ways to craft a deal and how to get something out of the dirt, but you got to start there. And you got to understand the rules of engagement with those two different paths are going to lead you in two different places.
100%. And just not to derail, I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but just for the listeners, like, what is the simplest way to view an equity partner as opposed to a debt partner?
Yeah, I mean, an equity partner is a true partner for the most part, right? Like they're taking the risk with you. You're assigning that dollar amount that they're contributing to the project a value, or not necessarily a value, but a percentage of what the net outcome is going to be.
Right.
And you're sharing in it with them in that regard. Now you find yourself with a debt partner, they're going to bring you the debt, but they expect nothing on the back end other than what they're charging you from an origination perspective, and then what your interest is you're going to have to carry.
Yep.
But it gets tricky, right? Because you have a couple of different waterfalls, and look, every project you create your own, you've got your own structure that you've got to deliver on, but there's a couple of different ways to approach it, but and I don't like leveraging debt. I never have. It's just not. But there are cases and times, depending on what your deal pipeline looks like, that you may choose to take on debt because your equity position may need to change. You just might have to, or that it's there and you want to jump in head first. Leverage the debt, right? Like deal's good enough. The risk reward, that's what you got to work on. So, but when it comes to deploying it, wow, is that such a great question, right? Well, first you got to raise it. So good luck there.
Right.
Because if you didn't have a full-time job building, now you got a new one. And then once you've raised it, welcome to having a boss.
Right.
Okay. Because now that's your first boss.
Right.
You serve them. Their return comes first. And that's the mentality that I take on it. Now you're bringing opportunity. You should consider yourself a partner in that transaction, right? But at the same time, make no bones about it. There's a lot that goes into it, and the perception and everything shifts from that point. So, but then you have to execute. Let's not forget that component of it. If just because you have the money, you got to put it to work.
Totally. 100%.
So there's the back half of it, right? So you go you do all this work to be able to take it in, and then you got to go execute it, and then you got to deliver your returns for your investors. Otherwise, there is no Series B.
Totally.
The easiest money to raise is the first one.
Right.
Everything after that is based on results.
1,000%.
So you might get one shot, but that second shot's going to be earned. And that's really, really important to understand, is like you be sure that you're ready to go down this path before you take it, because life doesn't have to be this hard. And I'm not suggesting it's hard. I've got partners, I've got people, I've got processes, I've got a lot of infrastructure built into developing all of this at this point. But you should just know what you're jumping into.
100%. Well, and I think like the execution side and having the boss comment are like very much one and the same, right? And you also talk about like know what you're getting into. Just like first off, like how did you think about this when you went through not just raising the money, but then deciding like who are the equity partners and what do they need to bring for you to ultimately like bring them in as a boss or a partner on these projects? Like, how did you go through that thinking and make that decision?
Yeah. Well, I'll be transparent. Like I am not a fan of having to turn over 7,000 documents to a bank and then giving my firstborn child as collateral.
Right.
And your blood test on the way out the door.
Right.
That's cumbersome. It's taxing. And yes, you can build great relationships on the backside of that conversation once you've done the hard work. But let's be real, as builders and as entrepreneurs, we're not exactly trying our very best to showcase how much money we make.
Right.
That's not the goal. The goal is to try to balance, that your taxable income versus what you're buying and putting back into the business and reinvesting. So, you've got a plan long before you go show up on the doorstep of a bank and get your financial house in order to be able to do it that way. The other side of the equation is that when you go to an equity partner, you need to understand that it is your deal.
Mm-hmm.
You have structured it for the reasons that you feel confident in doing the deal to start with. So you need to be prepared to defend your strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That strategy is uniquely yours. And the most important thing I think an investor or a GP can do, right? You're the general partner. You're looking for a limited partner. You don't want their involvement per se. You want their capital to deploy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to let them invest so much that they have all the power on the GP to do as they suggest, because they could come in and sabotage your strategy. And so I always say that you want an LP who aligns to your vision. Do they understand it? Do they believe in your core, in your philosophy? Do they believe in your core values and what you're trying to deliver for the reasons that you're going to deliver? Or are they really trying to extract every red cent out of that deal?
Right.
Which I'm not going to say isn't the right move. I'm
Right.
just suggesting that if you're doing a project in a lane that you feel really confident in being able to execute in, that you have to stick to your guns and you have to know the why of why you're doing it. And I think finding a partner that believes in that too is really important. But don't mistake the fact that you're going to have to answer. And so a really great way to do that is hold a monthly budgetary meeting, know your overage, know your under, know where you're at, have a plan in place for if you have a shortfall, make sure that you have a lever to pull if you need to go raise more capital, and whose shares are getting diluted in that, if it's an equity play. You need to have those rules of engagement defined. And
Totally.
I find that the more transparent you are in your pro forma and inside of your legal documentation, whether you're doing a JV deal or whether you're doing it inside of let's say a private equity fund, all of those things need to be clearly defined. Whether it's one sheet of paper or whether it's 500 sheets of paper. I know because I have both in my case. I have, I did JV deals to start. I still do JV deals outside of the fund because sometimes an LP comes your way and wants to partner on one to show proof of concept rather than get engaged on a longer term engagement, right? So my private equity fund is designed to operate for 5 years on a much larger strategy, right? So you kind of think about the onesie twosies, JV, you start thinking about a larger initiative, you start thinking about a private equity fund.
Right.
And in this case, it's like, okay, the difference in raising $8 million and raising 50, that's two different things.
Totally.
So, and there's a timeline horizon because you can go raise $2 million. Well, that's great. Well, what do you need to fund your project? Because you got 2 million LOI, but guess what? Now you're sitting until you go raise the rest because you can't deploy the capital until you're ready. So you can sit on it, but you can't deploy it. So, and then that transparently, that money can die on the vine if you don't go raise it.
Right.
So there's a lot of different moving parts involved with this. So again, it's a full-time job. You've got to be prepared for that. You got to understand that uniquely.
Totally. Well, and the die on the vine comment stands out because like, as you're explaining this, it's resonating to me as like, you've gotten started, or rather you've started the JV deals and the fund together or in tandem at the same time.
I just have them both going on. The fund is the newer of the structure type, which I've had equal amounts of interest in. It's just different type of investors that want to be involved in that because 10 million might be the starting point for a family office to want to invest, right? Whereas an individual, a friend or a family member or a close friend of a friend might be interested in going in larger, but on a shorter timeline horizon.
Right. Oh, and where I was going with that is like back to the die on the vine comment, like deploying that capital. Like, are you essentially looking at like the JV deals as like pipeline for your fund? Because like you'd made the comment of like the proof of concept, people wanting to get, a proof of concept out the door before they're fully engaged and like making bigger bets. Is that the way to look at it, or am I missing something?
I think that is just a circumstantial or situational kind of thing. You don't know who you're going to meet when you're going to meet them. You don't know what someone's what their strategy is or what they're trying to deploy. You got to remember there's a lot of different type of investors out there, just like you personally.
Totally.
Like your strategy is going to be different than my strategy. Are you looking for cash flow? Are you looking for tax savings? Are you looking for, are you looking for healthy cap gain, right? Like what are you looking for? So you have to know who you're approaching and you have to find out why or what their why is, unless they're just liquid enough that they can do whatever they want and take a flyer just for fun because they know that real estate is less risky than the market is right now.
Totally. Interesting. No, that's great. Well, and even like you were talking about the wellness side, like how are you structuring your fund and like how does that work?
Yeah. Well, the wellness and the fund are uniquely connected because the type of real estate that we're developing is luxury based on building for the biological. So, when you think about an ultra high net worth individual wanting to build their own home, they are absolutely going to be focused and leaning in on the newest technologies that are going to allow for them to operate at their peak. And so they're not interested in having a home that is just simply beautiful. They want a home that is functional and supportive of that optimization. And might I dare lean into a home that's going to allow them to potentially live longer?
Right.
Because I think that there's data to suggest, and we're having it tested very soon, I hope, that we'll be able to showcase from a statistical perspective that if you do these things, then you will potentially get this outcome. And so
awesome.
I'm not going to make a medical claim here today without having any data support it. But my past, my background. I'm not going to do anything without pressure testing it to the point where, if I were the buyer, I would be able to completely understand it and completely and buy into that. Right. So I take my health and my wellness very serious. I know that there are ways that we can incorporate specific systems and specific components into a home that will reduce my cortisol, that will help prevent it from spiking too early in the day, and will help me reduce my resting heart rate earlier in the evening, which will help me go down easier, which will mean my HRV will be improved as I sleep, which means that my sleep performance is better, which means that compounded over 15 years, I don't know, maybe those last 10 marginal years of life become a little bit better. Dude, I don't know.
I think this is just adding even into the why, right? When you're talking about like going down this path of raising capital, like the depth of your why and the authenticity of your why is so clear. And I applaud you for that. Just as a side comment, because like, it's not just like, oh, I see a trend in health and wellness and like, I think we can build houses around it. It's like, to your point, like you've got to pressure test it. It's got to make sense. You're seeking the data, right? There's a bigger vision at play than just saying, hey, this is a trend or this is a fad opportunity that I'm going to go after. Like you're going so deep that when you are going into these raising capital conversations, like it is clear that either that person's going to be on board and they believe in Brad Robinson, or they're just not the right partner.
Exactly. And I don't want to partner with anybody that doesn't see it, because if they don't see it, they're not going to understand the incremental costs that it takes to develop these at the onset, but they're also not going to see that supportive return on investment that may not come as physical dollars and cents on day one. But the client that we're trying to attract is going to look at that and say that there's monumental value in having those systems in that home, and one that will support a higher price point. So yes, my homes cost more expensive on day one to produce because of the systems that I'm putting into them. But the clients, once they've understood what components are in the house and the systems that are in the house are what the net benefit's going to be, they'll pay anything for that. Totally. Like, Reece, how much is a year of your life worth? Or, hey, how much is having a birthday where you're actually functional at 80? Totally. Like, would you pay for? How much would you pay?
100.
That's the idea. And it's like, I don't want to build for the sake of my structure being well built. Like, I'm going to do that anyway. I like to build my houses to last for a specific amount of time. And I would suggest that, we're building a generational home to start with. So that's the bar, like the floor.
Right.
The ceiling is building for that biological impact and effect. And there are plenty of people that are doing it and doing it really good. I mean, plenty is relative. I think that it's a small pool of builders in the market right now. And look, just like when sustainability and green building technologies, and look, I love passive, I love Fias, I love Energy Star because we need to protect our grid. I mean, good God, with AI coming, like who do you think's going to get first dibs at power? A
Totally.
residential homeowner or an AI farm?
1,000%.
I kind of think that AI farm will probably be able to outbid me on how much power costs. So,
Totally.
we have all these things that we need to worry about. These are not they're not individual conversations in a silo. They're all interconnected.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think this is just like a spectacular comment. I appreciate you coming on. I always like to say one last piece here is like, in terms of the individual that is, again, early in their journey, that's listening to this podcast and they're saying, damn, like Brad is like out there. He is thinking 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. He's building private equity funds. He's talking about joint venture deals. He's talking about all of these different things. Like, just to reiterate potentially, or just like, what would you share with them to get them on that path or in a position where they could build towards that?
I mean, first things first is you have to have a great foundation of what you're building. You can't step outside and let, I think if you looked at the average builder, I don't even know how many hours they choose to spend working on their business as opposed to running around, checking job sites, building schedules, dealing with the finances, or dealing with some individual office manager. But I've built a system that allows for me to spend 100% of my time working on my business.
Dude, that's beautiful.
Don't work in it ever. I have lots of great support staff and team and processes that they are doing on a day-to-day basis. And so my time is spent focusing on how I want to navigate this business through our climate, through our markets that we serve, and think in ways that will position us to be ahead of the curve, just like I think any top CEO in any Fortune 500 company would do. If they were forced to go deal with all the minutia of running a business on a day-to-day basis, they would be terrible CEOs.
Totally.
That's really where it comes down to. So you got to get your house in order. You got to make sure that the processes are there and that, quite frankly, and you got to have somebody manage them. That's it. It's not a micromanagement conversation. I'm a servant leader by nature. I just want to remove all the roadblocks from my people so that they can do their very best work. But once you've got the systems, scaled alongside the business, then you can go out there and focus on where you're taking the business.
This is a motivating episode in the sense of everybody talks about working on the business, not in the business. Everybody aspires to having the processes, the systems, the teams to execute so the owner can remove themselves from the minutia and focus on vision, execution. Where is this thing going to go? What's the bigger picture? What's the why? So I think for anyone that's out there listening to this, I think this is extremely aspirational, but know that it's not out of reach. Like this isn't impossible to do. It just emphasizes the importance of, as you said, Brad, get your house in order. Like, be real about where you are at in business and what the execution looks like to get the product off the ground in the hands of the homeowner. And then ask yourself the question, where do I need to be focusing? Do I need to be focusing on building a fund, or do I need to be focusing on systematizing, building the business so that I can remove myself and focus on this stuff?
Man, I was coaching, call it coaching, whatever. But I was having a great conversation with a wonderful builder down in the Sarasota market. And, he was asking me some questions about, how to develop these things. And one of the things that came up, and after I had that conversation, I started thinking about the why behind why you develop your standard operating procedures. You obviously want to develop the SOPs to fit the business today, but you do want to begin to develop an SOP for what that next potential role is going to be that you need to add to the stack. But developing those SOPs is going to essentially guide you towards who your next hire really, really, really should be.
Right.
And if you're stuck in a place where you're questioning, like, who is that next person going to be, write those SOPs and you will figure it out really fast.
Right.
But I say all of this because I'm not a pessimist. I don't think the world's going to end tomorrow. I feel like I'm in great health, but that doesn't mean that I don't go to the stop sign at the corner and get T-boned and I'm no longer here.
Totally.
I developed my SOPs as if the person who's going to have to come in behind me to figure out what all this is can do it. So if you just start there, act as if this SOP is designed. And I know in the building industry, it's highly personal. And oftentimes there's a missus, a wife, there's somebody who might be complementary to the business and operating in some kind of minimalistic capacity or even in a maximalist capacity. Draw your SOPs up like they got to step into your shoes tomorrow.
Yeah.
You'll find very quickly where your gaps are, and it will inspire you to begin to develop them more in a more sophisticated way that, you could be more hands-off. You do that, and for the right reasons, it'll flesh itself out.
That's extremely tactical. I appreciate the hell out of you for jumping on the podcast. This was fantastic. I appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
Dude, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. We'll see you, Brad.
See you.